Oh my gosh, is that new Market Madness music? It caught me off guard, but I'm so happy to be back. My goodness, this is Market Madness, the podcast from GiveMeSport, where every day feels like deadline day. And I'm Joel Beya. It's January the 15th, which means we're already halfway through the transfer window. And as always, we're here around 11 o'clock-ish. Ben, a little bit of timing issues there, just a little bit. And every Thursday throughout January. Alongside me, we've obviously got GiveMeSport's senior football correspondent, Mr. Ben Jacobs, as we assess what is going on, happening with Spurs. We're going to have the likes of George Sessons from the Press Association. We're also going to be hearing from Manchester City's newest signing, Antoine Semenyo. I don't know how we got that interview. The budget is going absolutely mental in 2026. And looking back at the Ballers League season as well, we're joined by the chairman of Macclesfield Town, who produced the biggest shock in the FA Cup history by beating holders Crystal Palace, my local team, all after Rob Smethurst bought the club during a holiday in Ibiza. I could not wait to get into that. Listen, it's a reminder that you guys watching should be getting involved too, and make sure to leave your comments, your questions all over for myself and Ben and whoever else is watching. Now, we're currently live on Facebook, YouTube, X, and if you're listening back, please make sure all you have to do is follow us at GiveMeSport, hear your playbacks, go across the platforms. We want you to know what's happening as it happens. For more info on any of the stories discussed today, head over to GiveMeSport's website and make sure that you're following us across socials, where you can get all your questions in and your comments, as I said, for the live show. So, right, let's get into it. This is Market Madness with the new sting on GiveMeSport. Come on. Ben, my brother, it's been a long time, mate.
Great
How are
to
you?
see you. Is it too late to wish you a happy new year?
Nah, it's never too late for me and you, Ben. Do you know what I mean? I have to say, you know, I'm really looking forward to this year. We've got the major tournaments, etc. And you know, you've been absolutely killing it as an individual. It seems like I tell you every few months, but it's a pleasure now when you are the go-to source, or when I'm in my WhatsApp group chats and someone says, "Oh, Ben said it, so it must be true." I love it.
I love you, mate. Thank you for the kind words. And yeah, big year ahead. I know we'll both be at the World Cup as well. So yeah, there's that. AFCON, I'm looking forward to as well. A bit of Senegal against Morocco. Love to hear people's predictions for that game too. So yeah, we've got a big year ahead.
Yeah. No, honestly, let's just make sure that we get those predictions in. Who's going to win? Is it going to be the home nation Morocco, or my favorites Senegal? They're my second favorites after Congo got knocked out. But yeah,
you're allowed to do that at a major tournament.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm really looking forward to that. And also, I know this is not part of the show that we're discussing today, but you know, it could be our year, Ben. Arsenal. It really could.
Ow. Speaking to a Leicester fan, where we're lingering mid-table in the championship, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And yeah, like last night, what do you make of the game? I think they should have killed it off a bit more.
Yeah, we should. But I'll be honest with you. The difference now is I see the Emirates as a bit of a fortress. So I'm not actually worried about them coming to our ground. I agree we should have done a better job of it, but we'll finish off the job easy. Yeah.
Confidence, mate. Through the roof.
Sure. For sure. Right. Plenty to get through on today. But as always, I'm going to be putting a little bit of pressure on you, Ben. We're going to be asking you, right, that same question, the Ben question, which is always, you know, something that you need to have an answer to before the end of the show. So for you guys watching for the first time, we set him off on a task. He's got great contact books, right? So Ben usually goes off and he gives us some amazing transfer news. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think you got one wrong yet. You ready for today?
So far, so good, but we're in a new year now, so everything is blank once again, and there's always pressure because you're only as good as your last story.
It's true, very true. Okay, cool. So the question for today is, will N'Golo Kante leave out Etihad? Will he be Etihad? Will he be leaving?
I mean, he will if he can't pronounce the team name correctly.
Yeah, it's true.
Bit of a tongue twister. Yeah, Al Ittihad up in Jeddah. And I will dig around a little bit because I think this is going to be one to watch this month.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, we look forward to hearing that before the start of the show. But am I correct to think that we've got some breaking news right about now?
Yeah, just want to start with a little bit of breaking news about the Glazers and Manchester United, because I can confirm that Avram and Joel Glazer and Sir Jim Ratcliffe have made their way to Carrington ahead of the Manchester derby, which on the one hand is quite atypical, but it's because there's an execco meeting which is pre-planned. Now, normally this would take place in Monaco, away from the day-to-day of the football club, but the decision has been made in the last few days that everybody must fly into Manchester. And that's firstly because they don't want to disrupt the football leadership team too much in the build-up to the Manchester derby. And of course, second point, they want to meet with Michael Carrick. Now, you might think that as a caretaker, by nature, but not by name, there's less pressure on Carrick than Ruben Amorim, or of course, whatever name comes in during the summer. But the semantics are really important here, because if you look at the Manchester United billing of Carrick, yes, he's only got the job until the end of the season. And absolutely, he's the caretaker because they're starting a thorough process to replace Ruben Amorim in the long term. But his actual job title is just Manchester United head coach. No interim, no caretaker, no allusion to the word temporary. And what I'm told is that the ownership of Manchester United will reiterate something that was said to the players 2 days ago before Michael Carrick was announced. And that is Manchester United's aim this season, not just qualifying for European football, which was the beginning of the season aim, but given how tight the table is and where they are at the moment, despite an inconsistent season, it's going to be reiterated to Michael Carrick and his team that Champions League football is the aim. So top 4 and likely coefficient pending top 5. So this is really key because the ownership are not taking a distant meeting. They're making themselves very transparent and visible at Carrington. They're going to be there for the Manchester derby. And in many ways, as much as they'll be meeting and supporting Michael Carrick, they'll be ramping up the pressure on him a little bit as well. Because once again, Manchester United's aim this season is Champions League football, which is highly possible, but also highly ambitious, given where they are and the flux and the departure of Ruben Amorim. And Joel, I don't know how realistic you think top 4, top 5 is for Manchester United.
I'll be really honest with you, Ben. I want to say it's not realistic because they've been poor, and statistically, Amorim had the worst record as a Manchester United manager since we've seen post Sir Alex Ferguson era. But I believe that the league is so tight that all you got to do is win like 3-4 straight games, and you're back in the mix. And they're already not in the worst position ever. So I think anything can happen. My question is will Carrick really have enough impact on a squad where the confidence level is on the floor?
Yeah, and I think it's about, if this is a player-driven culture and if this is a dressing room that manager after manager hasn't changed, and that's also on the ownership to an extent, are they better in some ways in the short term on a kind of autopilot with a Manchester United legend? And I think this is why Manchester United only went to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Michael Carrick, all 3 managers with the so-called Manchester United DNA. Some would say you need somebody to come in with a complete outside perspective and rock the boat. I think that's where the appointment of Steve Holland and Jonathan Woodgate as 2 of the assistants come in. But it's fascinating, really, because Michael Carrick in some ways will be under less pressure with the fan base, but is being given the business end of the season with more pressure, as I said a moment ago, from the ownership. And you're absolutely right in what you say. League table's really tight. Manchester United 7th at the moment on 32 points, but they're still only 1 win away from Liverpool, who are currently in 4th place. The other aspect to all of this, which I find really intriguing, is every single game now, that 3 points you lose, much, much harder to catch up, because ultimately we're beyond the halfway point of the season. Next 2 games, and the first 2 games for Michael Carrick, home to Man City, away at Arsenal. So if he can get a really positive start and, for example, get 4 or 6 points out of those games, then Manchester United have got the momentum and can potentially go on to do something slightly unexpected and get that Champions League football. But if they lose those 2 games, and on paper they won't be the favourites for each of them, you might suddenly find that 3 points to Champions League football becomes 4, 5, 6 points, and suddenly it's a lot harder to catch up. And this is why I think Man United have gone for Carrick and interviewed other ex-Manchester United players, because they realise there's no time whatsoever for acclimatisation or adaptation.
A quick question before we move on. Is 5th going to be enough due to the Champions League coefficients this year?
Yeah, we don't know at this point. So the assumption, because there's so many English teams in Europe, is that as long as half go into the knockout stages, there's a very high likelihood. And that's the byproduct, obviously, of the Premier League having a very high ranking and a number of qualifiers in the Champions League and the UEFA League and in the Conference League. But it won't really be clear categorically until probably March, when we get towards the quarterfinals. But it is very likely statistically that 5th will be good enough, as it stands anyway.
Okay, good stuff. Now, 2025 saw big changes in the boardroom and another change in the dugout at Tottenham. But the one consistent has been Spurs' underperformance on the pitch, which I'm smiling about. January is a crucial month for Thomas Frank as he attempts to shape his squad and indeed save his own job. George Sessons covers Tottenham for the Press Association, and he's been a regular at the club's training ground this year. And we're going to have him on with us right now. George, how are you? You okay?
I'm good, yeah. I've got to point out Tottenham did win a trophy last year, so it wasn't all bad. There's a lot of defeats, but we won a trophy, so we got to put that in there.
How could I forget? How could I forget? Oh man! But I'm going to let Ben kick this off because he's been excited to have you on this morning. Ben, do you wanna head off?
Yeah, let's start with a couple of questions. The topical one, first of all. Conor Gallagher feels, on the one hand, like the kind of signing Tottenham need, but not exactly like for the injured Bentancur, and perhaps more of an engine room midfielder than a creative and progressive passer. So 2-part question. What do you make of the Conor Gallagher signing? And do they still need another midfielder, whether now or in the summer?
Yeah, look, I think that's the key part, isn't it? This is a very good signing, I think. Conor Gallagher is going to come into this Tottenham team, which is underperforming, absolutely. And first of all, he's going to lift the levels straight away. He's going to go straight into that first team, I think. But it doesn't take away from the point that, yes, Tottenham do need somebody in that midfield that's going to be progressive and trying to get the ball forward. Certainly to somebody like Xavi Simons, who's had a bit of an up and down start, maybe to be expected. And there is that stat going around, isn't there, that Thomas Frank can't shake and Tottenham can't shake. I think it's 9 players in the Premier League have played more progressive passes than Tottenham's 11, which is nowhere near good enough. And I think that's a big part of why actually Thomas Frank is under pressure, because the fan base are so used to a certain style of football and the Tottenham way, and Tottenham haven't been able to do that. But I think Conor Gallagher, as much as passing and being progressive isn't his absolute forte, he's going to bring energy. He's going to bring a level of commitment and desire, which certainly hasn't been seen enough, I think, from Tottenham's midfield. And critically, he brings experience. And he doesn't get injured very often. Certainly not yet, anyway. Spurs fans remember that from Dominic Solanke as well. And then he comes in and he's missed a big chunk of the season. So hopefully Conor Gallagher is going to come in and make an instant impact. And West Ham on the weekend is a great chance for him to do that.
And then if we take a step back, George, Gallagher's come in, and yet in the space of 24, 48 hours, Fabio Paratici announced as going to Fiorentina, although he will see out the winter window. How does this change Tottenham's approach to recruitment? And is Johan Lang now just the sole sporting director, or going forwards, once this window shuts, might we see a slightly different approach and even personnel involved in recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, it's all TBC at the minute. I think right now the club's plan will be to replace Fabio. I think they feel in modern football there is so much to do, certainly when it comes to transfers and scouting and recruitment, that you do kind of need to co-director of footballs. We obviously haven't seen that a lot, but there is scenarios and cases of that. It is a strange situation. There's no getting away. It wasn't the plan clearly to hire Fabio Paratici in October, and then 4 months later he's going to be leaving at the end of this winter window. And I guess from Spurs' point of view, I think they were very eager for him to work this window. The noises around Fiorentina were, God, what about 3 weeks ago? Sort of middle of December and end of December time, they were coming in. So clearly this has been in the works for a while, but Spurs are very keen. They wanted Fabio to be working this window and to land key targets. And look, he would have played a role in this Conor Gallagher move, without a shadow of a doubt. And Tottenham will be hoping that he can get a few more over the line whilst he's here for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Now, I want to ask you, George, how much backing does Thomas Frank really have from this board? Let's be honest.
Well, I think he has more backing from the board than the fans at the minute. And the reason I say that is because you can't get away from the numbers. Spurs have won 5 of their last 20 games in all competitions, lost 7 in 13. It's, he has got injuries, absolutely. And that is something that should be pointed out. He's missing Dominic Solanke, he's missing James Maddison, he's missing Dejan Kulusevski. But I think the difference with, this season and last season is when Ange Postecoglou was missing Romero and Van der Ven, he had Archie Gray at centre-back and Ben Davies was filling in. And when Vicario was out, he had Fraser Forster there. Tottenham still have quality players. They've signed Mohamed Kudus. They've signed Randall Kolo-Muani, who hasn't really sort of, I guess, catch fire like some fans were hoping. And Xavi Simons is another quality player that's brought in. So for the squad that they have, I think there's an understanding it's not a Champions League squad, but it certainly shouldn't be 14th in the Premier League. So I think a lot of fans are really kind of split on Thomas Frank. They would have hoped in 31 games to see more. But what you do have to say is that the board are backing him this month because, Brennan Johnson was sold within the first week of the window, which on paper looks a really strange move when Tottenham was struggling to score and they've not got many attacking players. But the club back Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank hadn't been using Brennan Johnson, and they've got the funds in, and they've signed Conor Gallagher with those funds. And again, I guess Conor Gallagher is another case in point. I think he's been a long-term target with Tottenham. I think you have to go back to the summer of 2024, and Ange Postecoglou wanted him, but Thomas Frank has clearly seen, the midfield is an area where they need a big boost, and Conor Gallagher is going to do that. If they weren't sure on Thomas Frank, I don't think they'd be spending this sort of money to try and get Spurs out of the position they are. So I think he has got the backing of the board and certainly Vinay Venkatesham, but results have got to improve. There's no doubt about it.
So what does success look like for Spurs, would you say? Because we're talking about they have to improve. We're talking about where they were last season. We're talking about how badly they've started. What is success this season for Tottenham Hotspur?
Well, I think, unfortunately for Thomas Frank, he went out of the FA Cup a few days ago, and I really saw that as a chance for him to kind of connect with the fan base, to show how important the cups are, because albeit Tottenham went 17 years without a trophy, throughout the history of the club, they've always won cups. They've always been sort of contenders for these cups, even if they haven't always been consistent in the league. So he's lost that opportunity, and I think, they're 8 points off fourth, aren't they, right now? And you guys mentioned at the top about whether fifth will be enough for the Champions League. I don't think it will be, because it kind of feels like one of those where when there's 5 teams from one country, it's hard for them, then to get the 5th spot, and it kind of I think that's going to rotate over the coming season. So, what is success for Tottenham? Well, first of all, he's got to move up the table. I don't think any Tottenham fan is going to settle for being, bottom half this season. They finished 17th last year, but it's the first time in I think 16 years that they've finished outside the top 8. So for Thomas Frank, he's got to get more results. He's got to get Tottenham, I would say, at least in the top 7. But I think they'd probably want Europa League as kind of a minimum. But I think maybe even more importantly than this, he's got to start showing the attacking football that's in Tottenham's DNA. It's great that he's improved the set pieces, and Spurs I think they've scored 17 goals from set pieces this season, which is obviously, an impressive tally. But Tottenham don't want to be, and are never going to be, a set piece team that, they're used to Flair, they're used to Gareth Bale, Modric, Van der Vaart, James Maddison being another one, Dele Alli, Christian Eriksen. There's always been those type of players, and Tottenham have always played with a certain style. And I think Thomas Frank, during the next kind of 21 games, I think that's the minimum that the Spurs are going to have if they don't go far in the Champions League. He's got to show a better style of football, I think, to convince the fans. Because I think the board are behind him, but if the fans are going to be booing every week, that can only last so long.
Almost feels like an impossible task to replace Son and Harry Kane, at least instantly. They brought in Dominic Solanke, Richarlison has hit some form. Maybe still another number 9 is needed. but it feels like over on that left-hand side, Mattis Tell, despite being signed permanently, hasn't found that much consistency or goal-scoring form. Obviously, on the right-hand side, they got rid of Brennan Johnson, and he could have switched sides and played on the left as well. So do you think a winger is pretty much the number one priority for the summer now that Gallagher has arrived? And what odds of a Semenyo, who they tried for over the summer, or somebody like a Yan Diomande arriving at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, whether now or whether in 6 months' time?
Yeah, I think the club know, and Thomas Frank knows, that left midfield or that left wing position is clearly kind of a problem area. I guess the trouble is that Spurs have spent a lot of money actually on left midfielders. Wilson Odobert spent, was 30 million 18 months ago. Tell can play there, as you say. He also can play down the middle. You've got Mikey Moore on loan. There's a lot of belief in him. So you're kind of in a bit of a juggling act. Do you go out now and spend 60, 70 million on a Yan Diomande as you're talking about? Or do you actually, during this period of the season, back one of those guys, whether it's Odobert or Tell, to make that position their own? Because you're only going to know if they're good enough if they get a run of games and their confidence is boosted. I think Spurs in this window are certainly going to look for opportunities with attacking wide players, and Semenyo is unfortunate because I think there's probably a real possibility they would have gone big for him, especially with after they missed out on Semenyo, who obviously went to Man City. But Semenyo's now injured, isn't he? So that's kind of another one off the list. I think probably the one that I feel like, whether it's going to happen this window or maybe in the summer, it feels like Magnus Agliouche is one to keep an eye on. Spurs were interested in the summer. I mean, Monaco kind of expected him to be sold in the summer. Their kind of 70 million euro price tag, I think, put a few clubs off, and because they couldn't sell Agliouche, they sort of struggled to reinvest and boost their squad like they hoped. But I think Monaco are kind of ready that he is going to be leaving at some point, and albeit he's not a left midfielder, he's somebody that can play, on the right, is left-footed, can come inside, can play as the 10, can play on the left. And it feels like if Spurs are going to sign anyone this month, that they're probably going to be looking at someone like that, a really good player, but he's not going to be, 70 million. I think his price is going to be more closer to 50 million, which is generally where Spurs are doing their business. Even though there's been a change and Daniel Levy's left, I don't think you're going to see Spurs spending sort of 70 to 80 million just yet, especially not in January. But I feel like if they're going to sign anyone this window and they're going to be a wide player, it's probably going to be Magnus Agliouche.
We were speaking earlier about Manchester United and how the culture post Alex Ferguson is set right from the top, which is why fans are turning on the owners rather than only managers and players in that period. And in light of that, George, I wonder what you made of Christian Romero's Instagram post, because he gets named captain at a point when people thought he might be off to La Liga. Why? Because he did an interview and he said, I want to go and play in La Liga one day. Flash forwards and he stays, and he becomes the face and voice on the field anyway of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. And they're not quite like Antonio Conte, but he turns to Instagram, and I know that the post was amended slightly, but originally it essentially said, these owners do not face up publicly to the media or the fan base, and when they do, it's all lies. He then subsequently deleted the lies part. But what kind of reflection does that give, do you think, on the relationship potentially between this playing squad and the owners of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club? And is that part of the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a little bit of a disconnect with what the club view as their kind of plan for the next kind of short term to long term, and what is the aim this season, and what the players think. I think you ask Mickey van der Ven, you ask Christian Romero, you ask someone like Dom Solanke, I guess, even though he's not fit, they all think after winning the Europa League, why can't we go for more trophies? Why can't we go for the FA Cup? Why can't we go for the Carabao Cup? Why can't we sort of become contenders regularly? Because 17th, as much as Spurs finished there last season, there's huge context there. Mickey van der Ven, Vicario, and Christian Romero, barely played for 4 months of the season. You take out the first choice goalkeeper, 2 centre backs for any team, and they're going to plummet. And I think, even though Christian Romero definitely said certain things that he shouldn't have said in that post, I think his kind of aim with that, having seen Brennan Johnson leave, which didn't go down that well in the dressing room, I'm led to believe. I think his kind of desire with that post was to raise standards and say, this is not good enough. We shouldn't be settling to be a mid-table team, which Tottenham currently are, obviously being 14th. And look, I'm sure Tottenham haven't signed Conor Gallagher because of Christian Romero's post, but I think it did help kind of just put the laser and the lens back on the owners and back on how ambitious they are. Because, when Daniel Levy left, I'm sure, you heard Ben and I heard, from sources close to the Lewis family that, they want to win more and more often. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. And for that to happen, there needs to be a level of ambition in signings and wages. And I think Conor Gallagher is a good step in the right direction. And I think that was kind of partly where Romero's frustration has been, that 6 months ago, he's lifting a trophy in front of 200,000 Tottenham fans down the high road. And now Spurs are getting booed by 60,000 every week because they're not playing good football and they're not getting good results. And absolutely, Romero needs to be better. He said that himself in the post. He takes responsibility, but I think it's all part of raising standards. And as much as I'm not sure it was the best way of going about things, I think he was trying to get that message across that this is not good enough and we need to be better. And sort of going back full circle, Conor Gallagher is someone that does raise the standards. He was at a Chelsea team which on the outside at least looked a bit in disarray in Mauricio Pochettino's first season, and they got it going in the end and finished sixth and reached the latter stages of a number of cup competitions. And he was brilliant in that season, scoring goals, making assists, being a leader when Reece James and Thiago Silva were unavailable. So he will come into this squad and give it a real lift. And hopefully Tottenham fans will be thinking it's the first of many kind of signings and big signings to boost the squad and, more importantly, boost the first team, because the first team definitely needs to be boosted.
Last question before we wrap up, George. I just want to ask, is Mickey van der Ven a flight risk?
A flight risk? What do you mean by that?
Well, shall we say a risk in terms of like injuries, etc.?
No, as in a flight risk, somebody that could be looking to leave Tottenham. Will they be wary that he's somebody that might be looking for another move away if this project isn't on track?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he kind of fits into that same category with Christian Romero of he joined Tottenham to win trophies. He said that quite a lot, and he spoke about how when he joined, everyone told him, it was Spursy, and Spurs never win trophies. But now he has been at a club and he's changed the history of the club by winning that first trophy in 17 years. He's got a taste of success and he wants more. And I think there is kind of a bit of a disconnect, as I say, between the club realising they're in a rebuilding process, but they also have some quality footballers that are not just going to settle for being, eighth, I guess, like in Mikel Arteta's first season. Mikel Arteta went through a rebuilding process, but he also won the FA Cup in that time. There was enough early on to give him that kind of license and that leeway when he had tricky periods. And so far, we haven't seen that with Thomas Frank. He's not going to go deep in the domestic cups, and the results in the Premier League have not been good enough. And Mickey van der Ven, absolutely. If Tottenham finished 11th, and he has a brilliant World Cup, every man and his dog will be after him. He's a Real Madrid player, absolutely. But he will obviously cost a lot of money, and I don't think Tottenham will want to sell him. But if they're not in the Champions League next season, they're not in any type of Europe. And maybe there's a kind of a struggle to see what the real kind of short-term ambitions are, then yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there is plenty of clubs circling him and he's got a decision to kind of weigh up. But I think Tottenham and the board, especially the Lewis family, will kind of hope that actually, this Conor Gallagher signing is the start of, the new era, basically. He's the first signing since Daniel Levy's left. They don't want Tottenham to be, bottom half of the table. They want them to be pushing for honours regularly, and that we've heard that from people close to the family. So they will hope in 6 months' time that Tottenham are ready to really, have a big summer in terms of signing players and go again next season and be really in the mix, not necessarily for the title, but to be really in that Champions League conversation. And I guess it's worth saying they've still got a chance of getting top four. It just feels unlikely with the form and being 8 points off Liverpool at this point.
You know, George, I have to say thank you very much, not only for joining, but for also being the person who didn't know what a flight risk was when put down in the show. I thought it was just me because I'm from Crystal Palace. Where are you from, George, area-wise, by the way?
I'll say East London,
East
sort
London,
of,
yeah.
Raynham, Dagenham area. You could call it
Yeah.
Essex. I'd probably rather say East London.
Nice.
Maybe you just have to be old. Maybe you have to be
Yeah.
over the age of 40 to understand the phrase. I thought it was very common. It means someone that's going to do a runner.
Okay, cool. Got you for future reference. Yeah. But honestly, George, thank you so much. You're doing great work at the Press Association, and we really look forward to having you on again. And yeah, that was excellent stuff. So we're going to move on now, though, because we have our next guest, probably the happiest man in football this week. Because if Carlsberg did FA Cup weekends, this would be what they came up with. Non-league Macclesfield, who play 5 leagues below Premier League Crystal Palace. They did an excellent job on the weekend in the FA Cup. And not only did they complete a Premier League giant killing, they've got a chance to do it again after the 4th round draw with Brentford, now visiting the Leasing.com Stadium. Joining us now is the happiest man in football, the Macclesfield owner, Rob Smethurst. This is the biggest upset in FA Cup history in terms of difference in league places. Rob, how many times have you heard that this week, and how does it make you feel?
I'll just repeat it a few more times, boys. You know, just keep it going.
Upset in the FA Cup history in terms of difference in league places. Wow. Honestly, you look good as well, by the way.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah. I've it's been one heck of a ride, literally. I mean, the last week has just been absolutely insane. As you can imagine, the amount of social media that we've been getting. I think Macclesfield has literally just broke the internet. You know, it's been crazy. I've done some wild stuff. I've been on some amazing podcasts. I mean, even with you guys now, it's great. And you know, it's been you know, crazy the amount of social media. I think it is literally. There are no words. It is literally just not stopped.
Let's just take a step back. We'll come on to the game in a moment, but tell the brilliant story of how you ended up buying this football club.
Gosh, I mean, I must have said this about 1,000 times. It's a true story. You know, I'd sold my business in 2017. I was struggling with addiction. You know, I was a little bit crazy. I liked to party, and you know, I was out with my mates, and someone said, "Look, you know, this is on Rightmove. Do you know what? Would you, you know, literally within 24 hours, you know, crazy me had gone out there and bought it." You know, and it was one of those moments that, you know, if I'm honest, I couldn't really remember. You know, look what's happened. You know, it's one of the most craziest decisions of my life has turned into, you know, one of the most amazing, you know, and to create history as well. So it's it was a good night out. Maybe you know, there was a kebab, you know, should have got a taxi home, or do I buy a football club? And it was wild. You know, I was wild. So yeah, it was crazy.
I mean, just to be clear, you can buy a football club and have a kebab.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe the kebab might have been the cheaper option.
So then, as the dust settled and you kind of come down to earth and you're like, I've bought this football club, how did you then actually approach stabilizing a football club that had obviously fallen out of the league, was Macclesfield Town, had to be resurrected? It's one thing buying it, as you sort of allude to, on a whim. It's another thing then managing and stabilizing it. So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, it was a massive process. Obviously, you know, once I'd realised, you know, what I'd actually physically bought, you know, it was, you know, you realise how important a football club is to a community, and that was my sort of agenda, really, is to give a little bit back then and try and make sure that, you know, I could build something absolutely fantastic. And when I look back now, you know, I had no business plan. I had no idea what I was actually doing. But, you know, the amount of knowledge and the amount of information and, you know, what I've learned over the last, 5 years, you know, has been incredible. But the whole process was, you know, how can we make this commercially viable? You know, that was the first big project, was to sit down and look at all the finances of what, you know, something like this club would cost. And I actually went about building a 4G pitch on the facility. We built an amazing gym. We've got restaurants, we've got bars, and then it was really a case of then building an academy, which we have done. I mean, if you look at our academy now, we've got about 600 kids in the academy. We've got a BTEC program with over 130 kids in that program. I built an international football academy where we have 200 kids over from America, all getting a 3-year degree in sports science, sports therapy, sports business. So what I was looking at is how many income streams can we generate that can basically become self-sustainable to pay for a first team, because as you know, when you start buying the players and you start putting them on contracts, it becomes very, very expensive. So the commercial model was that, I started to invest a lot of money. I think at the time it was probably about 4 million in redevelopment of the ground. And then it was really a case of just trying to turn this into a massive community club, and I remember when we opened the doors for the first day, I'd been around with Robbie was helping me during this time, and we'd literally got as many players in from all around the area to see who could actually play our first match. And it was a case of building from absolute scratch. Like you say, we didn't have a pitch, we didn't have a team, and it was during COVID, and we literally had probably about 8-9 weeks to build a team. And that was kind of the journey on how it all started.
I have to say, anyone working with Robbie Savage is definitely crazy. I'll tell you that for sure. What a guy. But also, I've played on that 4G pitch, and I have to say, it's absolutely wicked. And I was very impressed when I went there not too long ago. Paul Dawson said he could tell that Palace didn't fancy it when he saw Mark Gay before the game. What's your thoughts on that when you hear that?
Yeah, do you know what? It was a funny feeling. The lads when they arrived, they looked not saying in shock. I mean, look, Crystal Palace are amazing. The one thing I can say, hand on heart, is the way we got our standing ovation from the Crystal Palace fans at the end of the game, and the way that the board have been, and special tributes that they've done to Ethan as well, and the flowers, and obviously the money that they've given us from the FA Cup. I can't thank them enough. For everything they've done, and they're an amazing team, a real family-oriented fan base as well, which is very similar to us, which is a huge credit to what Crystal Palace have got with its fans. But they just didn't seem up for it on the day. You could see, obviously, we're talking about world-class players here, and whether it was the 4G, whether it was the facilities, whether it was the occasion, or whether it was just that completely underestimated, what non-league football is. Non-league football isn't the lads now that run around with beer bellies, and it is more about now, the players that have been dropped out of academies, young 18, 19-year-olds that have maybe been at Manchester United, the same journey that they've been on. And it was, a lot of our players have, come to us because we've got a huge fan base. We've got very good players, and it was really their time to go out there and prove themselves. So I think maybe just a complete underestimation of what we delivered, what we can do.
So I want to talk about the game itself a little bit. I mean, what did you see that you loved about your team? Of course, you've probably been asked a lot when it comes to the passion, etc. But did you see any patterns of plays that you've been practicing on, and any individual brilliance that you really, really thought, oh, this is special?
Well, I think the start was special. I think it was a moment for me when you've got Dawson, running over and clattering heads. This was like welcome to non-league football. The next minute he's got a bandage on his head, he's got blood bleeding, coming down his face. It was a real statement, and I thought Dawson played incredible. But I think you also got the back four that were also performing unbelievably well. Sam, Venners. Our players were really looking after the lines, and I think there was, I can't remember the amount, but I think it was a good 8 or 9 or even maybe more offsides that we kept pushing them out of play. And something that John had worked on massively was obviously we knew that we were going to be having to defend well. If we had any chance whatsoever. So I know that for the last 2 weeks in training, I've been there. They've literally just been practicing those moves, and moving up and down, which they were doing for hours, when I was watching. But set pieces as well is huge for us. We also thought, look, if we've got any chances, getting that scrapey goal, that was something that they'd been working on as well. And when Dawson put that header in, I mean, the place literally, I know we haven't got a roof, but it lifted off. It was just one of those moments of, could this actually happen? and obviously then we went through 1-0, got to half time. And then when we came out, I thought, maybe they brought the big guns on, which they did. And I thought, oh, this will just be fun. It's going to be, look, it was about the occasion for us. We generally thought that we were going to, well, I did anyway, that it was going to be an easy win for Crystal Palace. And when Butley Ricketts popped in that goal, I mean, wow. There were no words. It was like, is this really going to happen? And then obviously they scored one back from an unbelievable free kick. And then probably me at that point then thought, this is when they're going to turn the gas on. And this is when you're going to see absolute quality come through and destroy us, maybe 4-5-2. But we hung in, and the lads, like I said, in defence were incredible. Of course, the passion was there, which you'd expect, but it was just unbelievable to see. I mean, it was just that moment in history. Is like, you've got guys out there that are plumbers. You've got guys out there that's a school teacher. You've got a bricklayer. You've got someone that's packing boxes with candles. Our budget is tiny. We've got players on £250 a week, and we've got players on, up to £1,000 a week. But we have got a real mixture. When you compare that to the big boys on their salaries and everything else, it was just one of those moments in history that I think we'll never forget.
Yeah, and Butley Ricketts has had a fascinating football journey, hasn't he? Where he dropped all the way down. I think it was from Manchester City, nearly out of football entirely. So then to be the one whose goal eventually won that game, that's a special individual journey.
It is special, and you know what, we do that a lot. We've got Damani Mallory come out of Manchester United. A lot of our players have dropped down the levels. You also, what's great about Macclesfield, it is all about pathway opportunities. We try and recruit, from higher up. We get a lot of players that, sometimes don't want to play for Macclesfield because we're too low. But when you get that sort of 4,300 fans walking through the door, our levels, we're probably getting more fans than what you get in League Two, maybe even some League One clubs. So, it is a real opportunity for young players to come to us and develop, and we can look after them with the facilities. We've got great facilities. We've got great staff, and we want to cherish that talent, as a football club, and make sure that, we bring them through with the right ways, the correct ways, and give them an opportunity. We've done that when James Berry, he was a massive player at one stage. He decided that football wasn't for him. Came back to Macclesfield. We looked after him. He proved himself. And then now look where he is now. He's moved on and Chesterfield and League Two, League One. He's played in. So I think that's the kind of vision of Macclesfield, is just to try and develop the youth now and give those lads a real great opportunity to move on and go to bigger and better places.
Let's just come back to Ethan McLeod, who you mentioned earlier. Very sad and emotional time for the club. And of course, if you're a FA Cup purist or a Macclesfield fan, you'll be remembering the victory itself. But my favourite moment, even though it was such a sad one, was how you brought Ethan's parents into the dressing room afterwards. I thought that was a beautiful moment to include them in such a time of unbridled joy off the back of a period of such horrible and tragic sadness. So speak to me a little bit about that horrible tragedy, how it's naturally affected everybody at the club. And even though it was bittersweet, how pleased you were to be able to further involve Ethan in the club's most famous moment in their history.
Yeah, I mean, it's, there are no words. It was if not, it's been, like I said, on previous, podcasts and things, the most horrendous thing that can ever happen. Not only just to his family, his family have lost their son, 21 years old. He's not even, he's a baby. He's not even had a chance to live, and he was such an unbelievable talent. And we got the call early morning, and we had to then notify all the players, and that was probably, like I've said before, just unbelievably heartbreaking to speak to each individual players with John. And we decided to bring all the lads to the club, and try and sort of talk about it, and be there as a team, really. And it was heartbreaking, and it was probably the first time that you know, I did generally think the club might be finished. You know, I didn't feel like I wanted to continue. You know, it was, yeah, it's been an amazing club, but you know, it just something happened and switched inside me that, you know, this is just crazy. You know, that this can happen on a way back from a football game, and I think that's the reality. And the horrible thing about the situation was that lads were only probably about 100 meters away in the bus. And we had no idea, you know, they were stuck in the traffic for about 6 hours looking at obviously everything that had happened, and you know, they didn't even know. So yeah, when we finally played that game, you know, John was sort of saying, should we mention it in the team talk? And I said, well, no, let them go out and play and express themselves. And you know, it's been a really tough time for us as a club, you know, and the players. And when the parents we had the massive pitch invasion, you know, the place erupted. You know, I was in the centre of the pitch with the players, and you know, I saw Ethan's dad and mum, and I said, look, you know, you are a huge part of this. You know, Ethan was our 12th man. This is your time. You know, the win was for Ethan, and you know, we went in the changing room, the players hugged. I mean, it was a really special moment, you know, I mean, an unbelievably special moment, because they're a huge part of it. And, you know, it's dedicated to them, because the players really, you know, have been through one of the most toughest times when you lose someone that's so close to all of us, and such a lovely lad.
Man, that is very well said, and I'll be honest with you, very touching indeed. I want to ask finally about Brentford at home next. How much is it worth to the club, and what does it mean for Macclesfield? Because, you know, and is it true actually that if you do win, you're going to take the players to celebrate in Ibiza?
I've already promised them that. So yeah, Ibiza's a definite. Yeah, I take them away every year, you know, and thank them for everything that they do during the season.
Wow.
So every year we all go away. We've been on 3 or 4 brilliant holidays. It's something that we all look forward to, win or lose. You know, we're like a band of brothers at Mac. We all stick together, and you know, we go through the good times and the bad times. So yeah, Ibiza's going to be booked. I'll take them all away. Yeah, so going through to the next round of the FA Cup is just probably unheard of for us. You know, but you know, could we do it? I mean, we never dreamt we would beat Crystal Palace. You know, I mean, what a fairy tale story. And you know, I think look, we've had our FA Cup win in our eyes. You know, this in my eyes is kind of like, you know, this is now the championship. You know, so if we win or lose, look, we've given it a go. But the reality of it is, you know, how incredible the lads have done to get this far, and we can't wait for the next match.
Rob, you're gonna have the whole nation backing you. You have no idea, and it's not even like we don't like Brentford. Brentford are a nice club, but you know, you've taken our hearts. So you know, we cannot wait to see Macclesfield back in action for the 4th round of the FA Cup next month. Thank you so much for joining us, Rob. You've done an excellent job, and you're a top man. But now keep an eye on GiveMeSport and Market Madness in the coming weeks, because we have a feature-length interview with a manager preparing to make his World Cup debut in the dugout this summer. No, it's not Joel Beya representing for Congo, but there is a sneaky peek of what to expect after Ben met the former Leipzig, Leeds, and now Canada head coach Jesse March.
Facundo Buonanotte, who's at Chelsea at the moment, will be joining Leeds United on a loan until the end of the season. Now, this is really interesting because there's a break clause, and Chelsea hijacked a Leeds move over the summer, and now Leeds have come back in, and due to a lack of game time at Stamford Bridge, Brighton, Chelsea, both determining the best option is to send the Argentine playmaker to Leeds United on a loan. Also, a little bit of news for you about Bruno Fernandes. We've heard some reports in the last few weeks that he might be off in the winter market. That's not my understanding, although true that Amorim and Bruno Fernandes were kind of allies in the dressing room. Bruno Fernandes is not considering his Manchester United future at this point. It will only come during the summer. There's a 60 million euros release clause for clubs that can trigger it if he chooses to leave after the World Cup. Naturally, Bruno Fernandes is keen to understand who the new manager will be and also what his role in the team will be as well. Some suggestions have hinted that if Bruno Fernandes leaves Manchester United, it might more likely be another club in Europe rather than Saudi Arabia. But I'm told don't discount a Saudi move. Al Nassr and Cristiano Ronaldo, Al Hilal and Al Ittihad are all looking. And if N'Golo Kante is to leave Al Ittihad, we'll come on to that at the end of the show, then Ittihad will free up budget. And even though Bruno Fernandes is not the same profile as N'Golo Kante, they will be going big on another central midfielder. But again, if those dominoes fall and N'Golo Kante leaves, and maybe even Fabinho as well, Ittihad are not expecting to come back in for Bruno Fernandes now. So Bruno Fernandes' future is going to be a summer saga. All options are still on the table. 1, stay at Man United under the new manager. 2, go somewhere in Europe. Or 3, of course, entertain another offer from Saudi Arabia, having had 3 different approaches over the summer. But suggestions Bruno Fernandes could go now, I'm told, are wide of the mark.
Before we move on, I just want to ask Ben, do you reckon that the fee will be the same as what clubs are willing to pay last year at 100 million, or do you reckon that's dropped significantly?
No, because as I say, the 60 million euros release clause, so that will inform the valuation. And my expectation, therefore, is that Bruno Fernandes, a year on and with that clause, will go closer to the clause number. The reason why Saudi were prepared to pay the higher number that you mentioned was because the clause is time sensitive. So at the point when Saudi were negotiating, the clause was not active for all of the summer, forcing a potential overpaying. And Saudi didn't mind that because they just wanted Bruno Fernandes. But now, with a big run up until the summer, my expectation is if Bruno Fernandes goes to Saudi Arabia, his clause would be triggered.
One deal's already been done. I mean, it's been a long time in the making. Antoine Semenyo, he's completed his move to Manchester City late last week and has already scored 2 in 2 games. It's been quite a journey for a player who almost gave up on football after trials at Arsenal, Tottenham, Millwall and Crystal Palace. Now, he's been speaking to Manchester City TV about his move and his journey from Bristol City, Bournemouth, and now in one of the biggest teams in the world. Let's play it.
Worked very hard to get to this point, and over the moon, it's done, and I'm looking forward to the challenge.
You're 26 now. Happy birthday for Wednesday, by the way.
Thank you.
Many people say that's kind of the perfect age for a club to buy an outfield player because you're coming into your best years. How do you feel about where you're at in terms of your development, and give us an idea of what kind of player City are getting?
Powerful, quick, strong, clinical player. Still improving. I feel like I'm still yet to reach my peak. I feel like I've got a lot of learning to do, and joining City here is going to be the best thing for my development. Best coaches, best players, and take my game to the next level.
Your football journey to this point has been one about persistence and determination. You know, you faced rejection as a young player, but as we sit here today, you're one of the Premier League's finest talents. Just talk us through how you've done that and what characteristics you've had to lean on to get to this point.
Well, I've had to be a strong character. I feel like emotionally, mentally, I've had to get really strong. I feel like I've had family, friends, fiance around me, keeping me uplifted and always pushing me. So, I've had to push myself quite a bit, get through a lot of troubled times, hard times, and it's just made me the man I am today, strong, fearless, and ready to attack the world.
A very, very impressive player indeed. I mean, I expect great things from him. Hopefully not too much great things, but here we go. And for those of you just joining us now, you are watching Ben Jacobs and Joel Beya on Market Madness. Please make sure you watch us across different platforms, follow us on socials, etc. It's a good show so far. Okay, so we actually have chat about Ballers League. Now, if you're not aware, it's taking it by storm all over social media right now at the moment. One of the biggest things. And if you don't know about it and you haven't been involved, well, we're going to tell you a bit about it. Our very own Sam Cohen has been there all the way through the tournament, and he joins us now. Fantastic chat, fantastic stuff happening, mate. It's like the biggest thing in the world, and every week you're packing out Copper Box. I just saw the final this weekend. How's it going?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's essentially the new age of football. So every week, 6-a-side tournament, fast-paced, managed by YouTubers and ex-pros, with loads of players involved, thousands watching across the world, live on Sky, live on YouTube, live on Twitch. It really has taken the world by storm, yeah.
Man, I'll tell you what, right? Every week as well, I see the maddest celebrity crossovers. Last year, you had the likes of Will Smith, there with PK Humble. To me, like, I'm just sitting there going, what is going on here? Ex-pros, Ian Wright, Alan Shearer, Micah Richards. Are you ever there? Like, do you ever get starstruck seeing all these people?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy, but of course, because we're there, we got to remain professional. And just for the viewers that don't know, some of the likes of the celebrities that are managing this Baller League Season 2 were John Terry, Alan Shearer, Ian Wright, Micah Richards, Jens Lehmann, Chloe Kelly, Robert Pires. All these massive names are all part of Baller League.
You know what? You probably forgot the most interesting person out of all of them, Olivia Bazarglo, our very own presenter here at GiveMeSport. She's out there rocking it on a weekly basis. I mean, tell me, who's been the most impressive team for you so far this season at Ballers League?
Yeah, well, obviously Wembley Rangers took the win. They captured the entire season. We actually caught up at GiveMeSport with Ian Wright a few weeks ago, and he talked about how he just likes to keep his team happy and play well. And obviously he's co-manager with Alan Shearer as well. So they were really impressive and probably the underdogs. I don't think anybody expected them to actually take the win. But also elsewhere, Nico's NDLFC, they bring their ultras every week with their drums and their trumpets. So yeah, really lots of impressive stuff.
Yeah. And you know what? Will it be coming back next season? And if so, do you know any of like the changes or improvements they want to make? Because they got like different rules, don't they, to normal football?
Yeah, so some of the different rules is like they have a game changer at the end of the first half and the end of the second half. That could be maybe that there's no offsides, or it could be 1v1, or it could be add an extra player, stuff like that. Are they coming back for season 3? Unconfirmed, but I think so. Speaking to a few of the staff members there, they are excited about the possibility for season 3, and they're talking about making it bigger and better than season 1 and 2. So we can only imagine what that's going to hold.
Yeah, man. So you had the chance as well to catch up with a fan favorite, Mr. Jimmy Bullard.
How was it playing there?
Absolutely brilliant. Tough, quicker than I thought. Just so good, dynamic, quick, strong. Everything I didn't expect. I thought it was going to be a normal 5-0. The pitch is so much bigger than you think. And the goals are bigger, so yeah, really good.
If one person is watching this that is looking to play at Baller League, what's that one piece of advice that you would give them?
What, looking to get in and
looking to play
quick feet, practice on quick feet, off the mark, core strength, dynamic, all of them words. You know, you got to be quick, strong, comfortable in one-on-one situations like Nani, like unbelievable. You can still, but if you're good at one-on-one situation, in a situation you'll do well here.
Lastly, moving quickly to the Premier League, who's going to win it for you? Are Arsenal going to do it, or Man City still in that race? Villa?
I'm going to go Arsenal.
I
think Arsenal, yeah. I just think they've got too much now, and they've been in this position a couple of times, not really got over the line. Not quite in this position, but I think they've got enough to get over the line this time. Just enough experience. The younger boys have grown up now. Yeah, it's going to be hard for them. The closer they get to the mark, the harder it's going to get, but Arsenal, I'd say.
Man, he still sounds like quality, man. Always a joy to speak to. I want to ask you, Sam, who is the best player at Baller League that you've seen this season?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a few, but I'm probably also going to give it to the same person that Baller League gave it to. He plays for Mini Minter from the side men's team M7, and that was Sam Fitzgerald. He was just brilliant. Every single week turned up, positive vibes, played really good football, scored a few bangers as well. So yeah, I'm going to give it to Sam.
Oh man, and very quickly, how was Nani's cameo? He seemed like he's still very fit and strong.
So we were actually very lucky to be like right in front, right behind the goal where Nani was playing, and yeah, he still got it. And I tell you, he could definitely still do a job for Man United.
Quick shot there. Listen, Sam, I want to say thank you very much for your great work. Honestly, we look forward to having you cover Baller League for us and telling us what's going on. But I want to bring back my main man, Mr. Ben Jacobs here, because Ben, we want to get to that question that we asked you at the start of the show. Will N'Golo Kante leave Al Ittihad? Can you let us know what the answer is, please?
Yeah, I think there's a realistic possibility. So Al Ittihad's perspective is that Kante's not going to sign a new deal, and they want to keep him until the end of the season when Kante will be a free transfer. But I was just on a call a moment ago, hence why I wasn't part of the Baller League chat. And what I can tell you is that N'Golo Kante has a new meeting in the next 24 hours with Fenerbahce, and Fenerbahce are pushing to sign Kante now, and the player himself is keen on the move as well, knowing that he has no plans to extend at Al Ittihad. So keep an eye on this one, because Ittihad and Fenerbahce is the problem. Fenerbahce are going to have to go and pay something to Ittihad to get Kante, even though he's only got 6 months left on his current deal. But Kante is prepared to drop that Saudi wage. There's a lot of money in Turkish football, so it will still be really well compensated. But Kante wants the move. Fenerbahce are the front runners, even though I'm told West Ham also made another inquiry in the last 48 hours. But Fenerbahce are leading the race. They're confident that they've got the buy-in from the player, but they've still got some work to do with Al Ittihad. And at the time we're live, Thursday lunch, no formal offer yet to Al Ittihad, but it wouldn't surprise me if in the next 72 hours, that situation changes as well. So the Saudi club are adamant that they're planning for Kante until summer, but Fenerbahce are pushing really hard to try and get a deal done right now.
I'll be honest with you, Ben. I think he's still going to be one of the stars of the show during the
Agree
World
with
Cup.
you.
You know, I think he's got so much to offer, and despite France's attacking flair, I think he's still the main man. I really do. But yeah, we'll be able to see that in America. But that brings us to an end of this week's Market Madness show. Olivia Bazaglo will be back with more exclusive content and breaking transfer news live next Thursday at 11 o'clock. Until then, you can listen back on your podcast app of your choice. Just search for Market Madness. And for more info on any of the stories we've discussed and much more, head over to GiveMeSport.com. See you soon. Peace.